Hi everybody, it's Marcy and I'm back to work on my little mini junk journal covers that I started in my previous video. So I've got we did the background with some acrylic paint and stenciling and paint stamping on there. And I've got my napkin Mod Podged and dried. It's actually dried now for a couple of days. And you can see, of course I have my images, but you can see how, because the napkin went somewhat translucent, I got some of those background colors and designs. And I like that. So the next thing I need to do, I've cut away most of my excess napkin. And so now I want to lightly sand my journal cover. And I'm just using these Equate salon boards. They come to a package from Walmart. You get, it's fine grit, 280 on one side, and light fine, 320 grit on the other side. And you can tell which side is which just by rubbing your fingers across them. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the coarser side and I'm going to clean up my edges just a little bit. Try to get rid of any extra napkin pieces that I wasn't able to cut away. And then I'm going to go over on the finer grit side and sand my journal down. Not sand it down, that's way wrong. I'm going to lightly sand it. So while I'm doing that, instead of having you watch me do the whole thing, oh, and I'm also going to lightly sand the inside where I've got this acrylic paint. And the only reason I do the sanding, and I think I mentioned this in the last video, is because I know acrylic paint can become kind of sticky at times, depending on humidity and temperature. And the Mod Podge can as well. And so the sanding helps give it a little bit of texture to it so that it's not as likely to stick. So I'm going to finish my sanding and then I will be right back. Okay, so I've got my journal covers sanded, and after, I'll show you those in a minute. After you sand them, you will want to take a very lightly damp cloth and wipe down your sanding dust. This is one I used, and you can see that you will have a little bit of sanding dust. So you just want to be sure you get that wiped up. Okay. These are the other covers I had made. So we've got this one and this one. That one's a little darker than I'd like for it to be, but that's because of the paint colors I used. It just darkened it up a little more than I wanted, but I think it'll still be fine. And then this one, which came out very fall looking, which I knew it would. So I won't be using this one right now. I'll be saving that for later in the fall. But on both of these, after I sanded, I took my Ranger Archival ink in coffee And I very lightly went over the raised parts. I just skimmed it along the top and went over the raised parts to get that sort of aged, and I did that on both of them. On this one, I just set it aside and let it sit because the ink is archival, but because it's going on top of Mod Podge instead of paper, it takes longer to dry. When I first put it down, I was able to run my fingers across like that and actually pull up a little bit of the ink. Then, after it set for a few minutes, I felt it again and it felt rather tacky. So I knew it still wasn't completely dry. Now, you can't tell it's there at all. This one, I did the same thing and immediately thought, no, it darkened it too much. So I was able to take a wet wipe, and because it was still wet, I was able to take a wet wipe and go over it. And it is still there, but it's lighter than it was. So that's fine. Okay. And then the other thing I wanted to show you, those did fine. And this is just a bit of a cautionary tale. Here on this one, on the back of the cover, right here, if you can see it, and right here, I got too aggressive with my sanding and ended up pulling up bits of napkin. Now, that can happen, especially if it's in an area that perhaps your napkin wasn't sealed really well. Doesn't bother me. We'll just call that distressing, and I may do something with that. But like I said, doesn't really bother me. It's on the back of the journal. It's not, it didn't affect the focal point of the front at all, and just adds a little distress, we'll call it. Okay, so now the next thing I'm going to do, and this is something, it's probably not necessary, but I love the way it makes the journal feel. I've got this Tim Holtz Ranger Micro Distress Glaze. And I absolutely love this stuff. It's like a wax. And you just very simply put a little bit on your finger. And I mean, it comes in a little teeny tiny 1 ounce jar. But I mean, you're just barely putting any on. You don't want it on there thick. And you just want to take your finger and put it all over the journal. And I will definitely fast forward this so that you don't have to, it doesn't take forever. Okay, so I've got my distress glaze on there, and I'm going to set it aside for just a moment to let it dry. The other thing I've got that I wanted to try, and I'm going to try it on this one, is I've got this, I've had it for years. It's Americana Decor Cream Wax, and I used this when I was using chalk paint on some wood furniture. And for some reason, it dawned on me that I still had some of this. And I'm betting that it will work very similarly to the other stuff, but I have a lot more of this. So I'm gonna, on this journal, I'm gonna put some of this on there and try it, and we'll see. So I fast forwarded through the last part. What I'm going to do is I'm going to, because this one will need to sit and dry for a few minutes. The Tim Holtz one dries really quickly. This one is a little thinner in consistency, so I want to let it dry for a little longer. So I'm going to pause the video. I'm going to finish putting this cream wax on here, and I'm going to let them dry, and then I'll be back and we'll see what we've got. Okay, I'm back, and the one that I used the Americana Decor cream wax on is dry. The Tim Holtz one actually still feels kind of wet to me, but I'm not sure that it ever dries fully, and it doesn't say anything on the directions. So this one, I'm actually going to follow the instructions, and I'm going to use a cloth. This is just an old piece of bed sheet, and I'm just going to go around and kind of buff it out. I'm not really trying to get a sheen to it. I really want to see how one feels compared to the other, because I know the Tim Holtz stuff, it leaves the paper feeling so supple. I don't even know how to describe it, but it just has a wonderful feel to it, in addition to having some protective properties. So all of the most of the napkin covered stuff I use a little bit of the Tim Holtz stuff. And like I said, for some reason, I just happened to think about this. I wasn't even sure if I had any left. But, okay, and I can see, I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but I can see right there where it is actually buffing out a little bit. I also did put a little bit around the edges on both, the inside edges on both of these pieces. As I mentioned, I think in my last video, oh, see here, it's very slight, but it actually is buffing to a little bit of a, putting a little bit of a sheen on it. I can't see that on the napkin side, but I can on this side. But when I put paper or fabric on the inside, it's likely, it's probable that a little bit of the edge will show, so I went ahead and put paint on the inside. But again, all of this is basically the tactile feel. Everything I'm doing is the tactile feel, in addition to avoiding stickiness. Yeah, I don't know if I can turn it. You'll see this one is actually, does actually buff to a little bit of a sheen. It's not going to become glossy, but you are going to get a little bit of a sheen to it. That doesn't bother me at all. And like I said, on the napkin side, it's just, it would be harder to see because it's on top of paper as opposed to being right on top of paint. But I wonder if I can see it. Yeah, I can see it a little bit on those spots where I had taken up a little bit of the napkin. Okay. Yeah, and that also gives it a very nice, I wish I knew how to describe it. It's not really a leathery feel, but it doesn't feel like just paper either. It's a very, I love the way it feels. Okay, so that's that one. Now for the Tim Holtz one, the instructions on it say just to use a paper towel. And I also did the inside of this one, so I'm going to start here. All right. Okay, I feel-wise, to me, they feel about the same. So I'm going to consider that a win because, like I said, it does give it a very, the only words I can use to describe it is it makes it feel a little more supple. But it also adds more protection. So, but I'm going to call that a win for the Americana Decor. I knew this would work. I wasn't sure about this, but it seems to work just fine. Also adds a nice supple feel to it. So, okay. So I'm going to set this one aside because I'm not going to work on it right now. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add the inside. And I've already cut down a piece of paper. As you may recall, my envelope is 9 by 6. So I've cut down some paper for the inside. And I made mine 8 3/4 by 8.5 minus 8 1/4. I folded up 2.5 inches for a pocket, and as you can see, when I lay that down, that leaves me a tiny border around the edge. And I am going to, I think I'll use some Fabri-Tac just for expedience. And I'm going to put my Fabri-Tac just in the center, not right up to the edges, because I'm going to be sewing around this. But I want something to hold my paper in place. Let's see if I can get it on there the way I want it. The lovely thing about Fabri-Tac is you've got a little time to move and adjust things. Okay, so I'm going to sew around the edges and I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back and I've stitched around my cover. So I've got my inside sewn to my outside covers, and I've got pockets here. And then the only thing left to do is to fold your cover in half, and you might want to score it to give it a good fold, and you've got the cover to your mini journal. And of course, when it's folded, it becomes 6 by 4.5 inches wide. Just the perfect little size for a little purse journal or just a note journal, whatever you want to use. And while I was at it, I went ahead and put wax on the other covers and put the insides in and sewed around them. So let me show you what we've got here. Here's the one that we used the Americana wax on. So I did that for the inside, sewed around it, creased it, and it's ready to go. You can decorate the cover however you want. Here's the one with the birds and the apples and the bird's nests. And that's what I did for the inside cover there. Stitched around it. And that one's ready to go. And then the one with the pears. The inside cover. And now these are all ready to be turned into whatever you want them turned into. I'll be using these to put some Happy Mail type items in and sending them out to some as gifts. Anyway, so that's the end of this video of how to make these little covers. I love them. I absolutely love them. So, and I love the feel using the wax. And I ended up using the Americana wax on both of these just to try it more. And I just love the way they feel. Anyway, so that's it for now. Stay safe, be healthy, happy crafting, and I will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.